Hey guys, welcome to the Fantasy Buckets podcast. I'm your host once again, Jacob. We're getting into week 8. Missed you guys for week 7. Apologize for that. I ran into some technical issues. Technology is great, but sometimes it can be a headache. But I think I figured it out, and I'm back, and I'll continue to try to be consistent with at least the weekly videos. So we're skipping week 7. I did take notes from week 7 and what happened. So you can use this information as always for the following weekend, which is now going to be week 8. I'm gonna stick to the script for the last video and have the Adam segment, the watch 'em segment, and the drop 'em segment. Not just focusing on waiver wire prospects, but I getting this far into the season, I think adding those other segments in there is also valuable information to have. And Rockets have been doing great. Patrick Beverley came back, and I think we're 11-2 or 12-2 since he's returned. So he's been great since he's been back and moved right into the starting lineup and provided that defense. I'll actually speak about him for part of the segment for the Adam part. So other thing going on, man, I saw that Steve Francis ran into some issues with the law. Man, hope that guy turns things around. One of my all-time favorite Rockets, all-time favorite players in general. It's a sad story, man. Sad story. Big ups to Steve. I hope he can get on the right track. Other issue going on with the Rockets is Demo and the whole restricted free agency and his contract. The Nets offered him a 4-year. The Rockets matched it, but then they matched it without certain concessions in the contract that worked in their favor, where they could use Demo as a trade asset. And I think Demo didn't like that very much, so they're still trying to work that out. Demo, I don't know how Demo would come back and fit into this offense. This isn't the same team from last year and the year before. Demo is a capable three-point shooter, but he's not a consistent three-point shooter. If you know Demo, you know his game is posting up, and that's what he's good at. He's got great footwork, and he actually led the league in field goal percentage for jump hooks a couple seasons ago when he had a good year. And I've always liked Demo's game. I don't know how he's gonna fit into this Rockets team and the way things are going right now. I'm kind of like, it's one of those things, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the Rockets definitely have things figured out as of right now. That being said, let's get into the Adam segment. First guy on my list is going to be Tony Allen. Tony Allen, shooting guard for the Memphis Grizzlies. Tony Allen has stepped up in Mike Conley's absence, in Chandler Parsons' absence, and James Ennis's absence. Zebo is back, but Zebo is a post player, so you still need that perimeter action. Tony Allen's been averaging 18.8 fantasy points over the last 5 games. He's averaging 32 minutes, 60% from the field, 8 rebounds, 1.4 assists, almost 1.5 assists, 1.8 steals, and 14 points in the last 5 games. So, man, Tony Allen's been putting in work, man. If you know Tony Allen's game, you know that he's mainly known for being a great defender, being a great perimeter defender. He's always been a good lockdown defender. I know he's made some All-NBA defensive teams in the past. He had a good run with Boston. never really known for his offense, but he seems to be doing that during this stretch while Mike Conley's out. So Memphis needs all the offense they can get, because they're missing out on the points that Conley was providing, and also the creation that he was providing. And Marc Gasol can't carry the whole load. He's a great big man, but he can't do it all. So Tony Allen is a great pickup. He is currently only 11.5% owned. Scoop him up. I think he's a great plug and play until some of these guys start coming back. Ennis may be coming back soon, but Ennis was a great waiver wire prospect earlier in the year, and then he fizzled out. So just keep an eye on that whole situation. But I think Tony Allen is the pickup right now for Memphis while Conley is out. He's really turned things around. Next on the list is one of my favorite players. He's a Rockets player. His name is Patrick Beverley. Patrick Beverley's been averaging 17.1 fantasy points over the last 6 games. He's been hooping, man, and I gotta tip my hat to D'Antoni, because I was kind of skeptical about benching Gordon and having him come off the bench, because I felt like the Rockets were doing decent at that time, and had won a couple games, a couple tough ones. But I was skeptical about, Gordon going to the bench, and then Beverley just, not really playing all season and just coming back and being thrusted into the starting lineup. I wasn't sure how that was going to work, but man, it's worked like a charm. Patrick Beverley's brought some defense. He brings that energy to the first unit. And man, he's been doing great. And Eric Gordon comes off the bench with the second unit and kind of plays a role that Harden has when Harden's with the starting 5. So like I said, he's been averaging 17.1 fantasy points. He's averaging 31.4 minutes, 9.6 points, 7.2 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 1.6 steals over the last 5 games. So he's putting up numbers. He's putting up stats. And I don't see why this couldn't continue. He's going to continue getting minutes. He's the Rockets' best on-ball defender. So he'll continue to get those consistent minutes. Man, he did a great job of locking up Russell Westbrook last week during the final minutes. And he's just been great, man. He's been all over the court. And if you're familiar with Beverley, he's always done that. He's never been a big scorer. He's always been about defense. But the fact that he's getting minutes and then he's chipping in a good handful amount of different stats across the board, that's all you can ask for a guy like that. And if he can do that, he's going to get you, 15 to 16 to 17, in between that 15 and 20 point range for fantasy points. And as of right now, he's a great pickup. He's playing ball. He's doing great. Rockets are doing great. They CBS actually ranked them as the number 1 team in this last week's power rankings for the NBA. ESPN still kind of hating on them and had them ranked a little lower than that. But yeah, man, pick up Patrick Beverley. He's doing his thing. He is only 19.6% owned in most leagues, so he should be available to over about 80% of the leagues out there. Next guy on the list is Deron Williams. Deron Williams, point guard for the Dallas Mavericks. Man, Deron Williams was a beast back in the day. Father Time caught up to him, and he's not the same player, but he still knows how to hoop. Like, that's one thing about players is all the best players have the best IQs, and as their games and athleticism deteriorate, they rely more on their IQ. And D. Will has always had the IQ. he's just had injuries and has lost that athleticism that put him into that elite conversation. He just nowadays he just can't stay healthy. But that being said, he's a good pickup, a good plug and play. He's averaging 16.4 fantasy points over the last 6 games. He's averaging 14.5 points, 10.5 assists, 2 rebounds, and 1.5 3-points made in 32.5 minutes over the last 4 games. So he's giving you almost 15 points and almost 11 assists in his last 4 games. Reason for that, he's getting minutes. He's playing 32 minutes, and that's a lot of minutes for Deron Williams, especially compared to his recent playing time over the last couple seasons. He hasn't been playing those type of minutes since he was with the Nets and the Jazz and back in his heyday. So the key thing here for Deron Williams is plug and play him as long as he's healthy. Now, plug and play him, but he could sit out tomorrow. He could sit out. The next 2 games. There's really no way to tell when he's gonna be healthy or not, because this guy's constantly in and out of the lineup. But as of right now, plug and play him, because you still got Barea out. I know Seth Curry was banged up. The only other backup they have is Jonathan Gibson. Wesley Matthews finally woke up, and I had Wesley Matthews as a guy to add for week 7, but of course I ran into those technical issues. So Wesley Matthews has picked it up, and he has improved his shot and has found his shooting touch to help out Harrison Barnes. But they still, the Mavericks rank as a last place defense in the NBA, and as far as points per game. And they still need somebody to score the ball, and Deron Williams can definitely do that, and he can also dish out some assists. So as of right now, while they have some injuries and they're struggling to put up points, Deron Williams is a great plug and play as long as he's healthy. If as long as he's healthy, you can treat him like a permanent roster player on your team, because he's that good. He has that type of pedigree. Although he is a little, washed up, he's not completely washed up. He can still, get you some stats and get you some statistics. He's only 43.5% owned, and that's under the 50% tier that I try to stay under. And I think the main reason he's got that 40% ownership percentage is because it's just because of his name and what he's done in the past. He's people still remember what Deron Williams was. So he's definitely capable of putting up some statistics and helping your fantasy team out for the time being. So scoop him up in week 8. He'd be a great plug and play. So that concludes the Adams segment. The next segment we're gonna get into is the what I call the Court Vision Watch 'em segment. Excuse me. So first guy I have for the Watch 'em segment is T.J. Warren. T.J. Warren, small forward for the Phoenix Suns. So T.J. Warren was hot in the beginning of the year. He was putting up buckets. He was a sleeper's pick that not a lot of people expected to come out of Phoenix, and all the hype was about Devin Booker, and T.J. Warren was actually putting up better fantasy production than Booker was. And Booker's still only averaging around 12.7 points, but he does put up a lot of shots. So that's separate. That's separate from this, but T.J. Warren was the guy behind Bledsoe as far as fantasy production, and filling up the points category. He was averaging 17.7 points and 32.4 minutes before his injury. He was also averaging 15.2 fantasy points before injury and was second on the team in minutes. He also led the team with 1.9 steals per game. So he was getting you 2 steals per game as well. He's been out. He had a head injury that the Suns really didn't release a lot of information on, and didn't really explain what exactly the injury was. But he did have a head injury, and he's been out. He's been playing 3-on-3s at practice, and has been, getting in some low contact work during these practice sessions. So he should be coming back soon. If he comes back, I assume he'll get his starting role back. PJ Tucker's been starting for him, and PJ Tucker has been decent. Has had some good games. But he's been inconsistent, and he's just not the scorer that T.J. Warren is. He's probably a better defender, but the Suns have been their record isn't looking so great, and T.J. Warren was I don't see why the coach wouldn't plug him in and give him that starting role and start giving him those 32 minutes to put up points like he was before. So I think he's a guy to watch. If you want to scoop him up now, it may be a little too early. That's all, like I say, depending on your roster, and if you can go with losing that roster spot and not getting points for the time being. But he may come back the next game, maybe the second game from now, and he'll get you some points and might move right into the starting lineup. So T.J. Warren, I think somebody to keep an eye on. He's only 38.6% owned. He was 70% owned before the injury, and then folks just started dropping him, and I don't blame you because he did miss a good amount of games. But he could be back, and he could get back to that early season form that surprised us all. For Phoenix. So keep an eye on T.J. Warren. Watch him. Next guy on the list is a former Rockets player, and I always liked his game. Thought he was a cool cat. His name is Omri Casspi, a small forward for the Sacramento Kings. So Omri Casspi has been averaging 15.2 fantasy points over his last 4 games. He scored 10 plus points in 4 games. In the last 4 games, and he's shooting 62% from the field, and he's shooting 57% from the 3-point line, which are great shooting percentages. So he's high. He's been doing well. His minutes are trending upward the last couple games. He only averages around 19-20 minutes on the season, but he's gotten 25 plus, a 27-minute game. He got a 30-minute game recently. So the coaches have been consistently bumping his minutes up, and he could potentially be the leading scorer for the Kings bench unit. DeMarcus Cousins, of course, is going to get his, and Rudy Gay is going to get his, but they need shooters, and Omri Casspi is a capable shooter. If he comes off the bench and he continues to put up these type of numbers, he could move into that 6-man role, kind of like Eric Gordon is doing for the Rockets and Lou Williams is doing for the Lakers. So keep an eye on Omri Casspi. If he continues to progress and continues to get you 15 plus fantasy points per performance, he's definitely worth a look and worth an ad. If you need a plug and play, by all means, plug and play him, because he's been doing. If he's done it for the last 4 games, I would think he could do it for his 5th game and his 6th game. So great plug and play, but somebody just to watch that could potentially keep on trending upward. And if he continues this for a couple more games and his minutes continue to go up, definitely scoop him up, and then that's where you would slide him over to an Adam type of waiver wire prospect. So right now, I think he's just somebody to watch. I think he needs to get some games where he has consistent minutes of at least 25 plus minutes per game, and then you could definitely add him to your roster as a plug and play. or maybe drop somebody that's weaker for him. Mentioning that, kind of alluding to my next segment, which is going to be the drop 'em segment. And if you have these guys, you can probably take Casspi and drop one of these next guys that I'm going to speak about. So that's it for the watch 'em segment. I just had those two guys. Next for the bench warmer drop 'em segment is going to be two players. These are guys that I believe are over-owned. They're not producing the way they should be. And, sometimes you get attached to players, and that's the thing. You can't get attached to players in fantasy basketball. If they're not producing, you gotta let them go. And sometimes that's a tough call to do. But, sometimes you have to do that for the betterment of your team. So first guy that I think needs to be dropped by a lot of folks is Monta Ellis, shooting guard for the Indiana Pacers. Monta Ellis is only averaging 10.9 fantasy points on the season. There's just too many ball handlers on the team. Jeff Teague is there. Paul George is there. They have great guard play. Miles Turner is getting buckets. He's averaging more points than he did last year in his second year. And if you know Monta Ellis's game, Monta Ellis needs the ball in his hands. He's kind of one of those guys who creates his own shot. He's former All-Star and he had his moments with the Warriors, but he's always been that type of player that's created his own shot and he just can't do that with the Pacers right now. They brought Jeff Teague over, and Jeff Teague is hooping. They also got C.J. Miles coming off the bench and giving them great scoring production in that 6-man role. So I just don't see how he can progress and improve on what he's done so far this season. He's 6th on the team in scoring, and he's also 6th on the team in shot attempts. So that right there just is an indicator of how involved he is in the offense. It is Paul George's team. He was doing better and had more opportunity while Paul George was out briefly. But Paul George is back now, and I just don't see Monta Ellis' production trending upward. If you're the 6th option on a team, it's going to be very hard for you to put up some points. In addition to that, he just had a groin injury, and he's going to be out at least 4 games. So there's no reason to hold on to this guy. Drop him for one of the waiver wire prospects that I mentioned earlier in the Adam segment. Drop him for Omri Casspi. Don't hold on to him for 4 games. I'd rather hold on to T.J. Warren for 4 games if he comes back within that span, then hold on to Monta Ellis. He's 72.3% owned, so he's almost 75% owned in most leagues, and I believe he's over-owned. So drop him. Monta Ellis is hurt. He's not worth holding on to. Next guy on the list, who I believe is over-owned, and I've labeled a bench warmer, is Jordan Clarkson, point guard, shooting guard for the Los Angeles Lakers. He's only averaging 11.1 fantasy points on the season. He's only averaging 2.3 assists on the season, and that's because there's, like, similar to the Pacers, there's lots of ball handlers on the Lakers, and they've got D'Angelo Russell, they've got Brandon Ingram, who's handling the ball a lot. They've got Calderon. They've got Huertas. And there's just too many guys who are touching the ball. And, they got Lou Williams, who's putting up buckets. Knew I was forgetting somebody. And it's it's very hard for a Laker player to just produce a top tier type of fantasy production, just because it's so spread out. Luke Walton uses everybody, and Lou Williams is just going nuts right now. He's putting up buckets in a hurry, and I've mentioned him before in my previous videos, and he's one of those guys that just can score, and he can score 20 points in 15 minutes. So he's just been doing that. He's been on fire. I don't think anybody else on that team has that capability, which kind of makes Lou Williams an exception to what I'm saying. The only guy who really has a carved out role and that does not have a lot of competition as far as what he does and what his role is Julius Randle. Julius Randle's kind of like the poor man version of Draymond Green for the Lakers. For what, comparing that to what Draymond does for the Warriors. So Randle is successful because he gets rebounds, he gets a handful of assists, he gets you points. He's got his hands in different other stats, and the fact that Jordan Clarkson is only averaging 2.3 assists on the season, that's like fourth or fifth on the team. That's just not a good look. He's not gonna score enough points to be able to consistently give you good fantasy production, where he's giving you at least 15 plus points on a regular basis as far as fantasy points. And he's just not that type of scorer. And in addition to that, he's sharing, the ball with all these other younger, not younger, but all these other peers that he has on his team. And I just don't see how there's enough basketball to go around to all these young guys and have one of them just flourish, where they are must-adds and must-have players rostered on your team. D'Angelo Russell was averaging about 15 fantasy points before he got hurt, but I don't know if he can keep that average up. Like I said, the only one that I've seen that can keep a above 15-point fantasy average is Julius Randle, and that's just because he's kind of unique to the team and what he can do at the power forward position. So Jordan Clarkson, he's 80.2% owned, and he's definitely over-owned. I don't know if that has to do with him just being a Laker, and I know maybe a lot of the Lakers fan base plays fantasy basketball, so they probably have him rostered. But I don't see it getting any better for him. D'Angelo Russell and Nick Young are coming back from injuries, so there's a lot of competition around there. The Lakers have 5 players averaging double-digit scoring, so it's not like there's no alpha males on that team. There's nobody who can say this is my team. It's all these young guys collectively growing together and trying to figure things out, and trying to grow under Luke Walton's coaching. On top of that, if Brandon Ingram, starts getting adapted to the NBA and starts continuing to improve, he's the guy that I feel has the most potential out of all these young players, and he could potentially be that alpha male and be that guy. I don't know if it'll happen this season, but potentially it could. So all that being said, there's just too much going on with that young Laker team, and it's hard to just rely on one of those guys as a top tier fantasy type of producer. So Jordan Clarkson averaging 11.1 fantasy points is not a good look. And I guess that being said, a good for our league, and this is all dependent on how your scoring is and how deep your league is. But in our league, a 15-point average per game is kind of a good gauge as to whether a player should be rostered permanently or not rostered permanently. Once you start getting into the 14, 13 range. So if you have players on your team that are averaging that, and they've averaged that since the beginning of the season, they're not necessarily guys you have to just keep, because if you can find somebody on the waiver wire right now that has similar averages and similar numbers and similar minutes per game, because minutes are important, they're opportunity, like I always say, then a lot of times those players aren't worth holding on to. So that's just something to be aware of, something to think about. And that's all I got for week 8. Going into week 8, like I said, man, I had some technical issues. Technology is great, but it can be a pain in the butt. But I figured it out. So like, comment, share. You can find me on Twitter at fantasy_buckets. I post content on there sometimes, especially when there's injury updates throughout the week. Shoot those out to you guys. And I appreciate you guys watching, man.